go. So today we are talking about symptom mapping for PMDD. This is an image of our symptom mapping kit, and I'm going to give you a link to grab this if you haven't already accessed it at the end of the call today. But first, I just want to introduce myself if any of you are new to me or my work or this community. My name is Jess Fleming. I am a board certified integrative menstrual health educator, coach, nutritional therapist, and the founder of Her Mood Mentor, which is a virtual premenstrual clinic. And my own experience with PMDD, which nearly cost me my life, has fueled my determination to guide thousands of you towards reclaiming days, weeks, months, and even years of your own life from hormonal mood symptoms. Here's a little bit of my educational background. You can also see a more extensive list of this on our website at Her Mood Mentor, but that's kind of giving you a little bit of background into how I got into this work, started building the practice, and have been in practice now for going on 7 years in the space. I can't believe it's been that long, but it's been such a joy and pleasure to help others learn to reduce and manage severe premenstrual symptoms after suffering with them for so long myself. And then before we get into the training, I also want to share a client case study because the whole point of us learning to symptom map is to target and reduce our symptoms, maybe get a diagnosis, maybe judge the efficacy of the protocols that we're putting into place, which we'll talk about all of that. But we do this in the clinic with our one-to-one clients, and I encourage all of my PMDD rehab students to do this as well. And it's how we build protocols to target those symptoms. It's how we judge whether or not those protocols are working and kind of course correct as we move through the healing process in our one-to-one programs. And so here a client came to me and she said, we asked her when she was starting the program what her primary hormonal mood symptoms were and how they were impacting her daily life. And she said, when I started this program, my primary symptoms were anxiety, depression, anger, irritability, crying spells, acne, and bloating. They were affecting every aspect of my life, including my motivation at work and in personal projects, my relationship with my boyfriend, and my ability to finish tasks in the day, my self-care, etc. She said I felt helpless and needed an external guide to help me work through my symptoms and my struggles. So with all of my one-to-one clients, and you can do this as well, you have access to run a symptom assessment. This is in the community on the right side. If you're logged into the desktop, I'm not sure exactly where it shows up on the app, but it's right there on the front page of the community. You can schedule an introductory session, and in the introductory session, we run a symptom assessment. And this is what that looks like. So this client came to me in May of last year. We ran her symptom assessment, and that orange line is where she was starting from. She had a symptom burden of 359 points. We used symptom mapping. We ran a functional lab test, and we worked through my process targeting those symptoms that we were tracking on her symptom mapper. We built personalized protocols for her, and at the end of around 4 months, she retook the symptom assessment, and that blue line is where she was when we wrapped up in October. Her symptom burden in October was 89 points. So within that time period, she reduced her symptom burden by 270 points. And she came out of the program. We asked, in what ways has the quality of your life improved since starting the program? Are there any areas you've noticed significant positive changes? And she said, in general, I've noticed that I just feel more grounded and stable. I feel more consistent in my energy levels and in the ways I can give to myself and others. I feel a more present friend, family member, and partner. I enjoy connecting with others more and feel less daunted by the idea of socializing or putting myself out there in social situations. I also feel a much deeper inner compassion and peace. I forgive myself and care for myself instead of tearing myself down and seeking negative thoughts or ideas of bettering or perfection. I have more energy to work out, cook for myself, make more art, read, and do the things that I enjoy. This makes me feel more connected to myself and to my inner child, which brings a lot of joy back into my life. And it's interesting when you start to heal these symptoms, especially if they're consuming 2 or more weeks of your life that you start to, as you heal those symptoms, you start to connect with and revisit a version of yourself that you may not have seen in a long time. And this client was dealing with symptoms since she got her period. So she was um, literally a child still. And so reconnecting with herself in a new way was such a gift for her through the process. And that is possible for you as well. And I always recommend starting with the symptom mapping to get you started there. So let's dive in. We're going to be talking all about symptom mapping for PMDD today, but make sure to stay to the end to get the link to the kit. And also, I'm going to be giving you a special offer to opt into if you decide you want to do that and it feels like a good fit. So first, I just want to explain what PMDD is. Stands for premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's a cyclical mood disorder that causes significant mood changes and physical symptoms during the luteal phase, that's 7 to 14 days, maybe 16 days before you get your period. Unlike PMS, we're going to talk about the differences between PMS and PMDD in a moment, but they're very different. And I don't want to be redundant here, so we're going to move on and I'll come back to the 4 differences between PMS and PMDD in a moment. Some of the primary symptoms of PMDD are depression, losing interest in your usual activities, changes in appetite, whether that be food cravings or whether
That's
that
fun.
be so happy. At least we're gonna meet her. Maybe that be food cravings or an aversion to food, fatigue, also insomnia can fall into this, anxiety, difficulty thinking and concentrating, reduced libido, self-harming thoughts and behaviors. And I'm going to show you the actual diagnostic criteria for PMDD and the DSM towards the end. But those are some of the symptoms, and if you're here, you already probably know that. Some of the risk factors for PMDD, we do see a genetic link, both in twin and family studies, about a 30 to 80% heritability. We see a link with trauma and childhood adverse events and reproductive mood disorders, menstrual health disorders. Nutrient deficiencies, exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals can play a role. There's a link between neurodivergence and severe premenstrual symptoms. Poor light environments are going to be impacting the severity of your premenstrual symptoms. There's a really cool study that just recently came out last year that was on over 89,000 individuals partook in this study, and it revealed that our light environment is linked with mood disorders. So I talk a lot about that. I have a separate training in the community called Seasonal Depression and PMDD, or Seasonal Affective Disorder and PMDD. So you can watch that and learn all about those connections there. But a lot of things are going to play into how severe your symptoms are, and we're also going to talk about that in a moment. But first, we have to recognize that the symptoms of PMDD are only occurring during a specific window. Now, they have identified 3 subtypes of symptom presentation for PMDD, but it's primarily starting at ovulation and lasting through the luteal phase, onsetting in the 2nd week of the luteal phase, and subsiding with menstruation or lasting a little bit into menstruation. So really it's about depending on how long your menstrual cycle is, a 14 to 18 day period of time that we're talking about here. And the symptom mapping process is really going to help you differentiate, is this PMDD or is this something else? And we'll talk about premenstrual exacerbation in a moment, but let's talk about those 4 differences between PMS and PMDD. So the first difference is the cause. PMS is believed to be caused by a hormone imbalance, where PMDD is believed to be caused by sensitivity to the natural fluctuation of hormones. There's a lot of nuance there. We're not going to get into it here, but I do have a blog post and a podcast episode about these 4 differences. The severity is also different. PMS is mild to moderate. PMDD symptoms are going to be moderate to severe, significantly impacting your quality of life. The duration is also different between PMS and PMDD. PMS is going to last around 3 to 5 days, where, like we said, PMDD can last 7 to 16+ days. And then the prevalence, it's reported that 90% of women experience PMS symptoms at some point in their reproductive life, but 3 to 8% are suspected to be experiencing PMDD. Now, I do think that that is a gross underestimate considering the misdiagnosis rates, but that's the statistic that we're working with right now. So premenstrual exacerbation is really important because as you're doing the symptom mapping process, you're going to want to look out for this because a lot of premenstrual symptoms are often an exacerbation of symptoms that you already have. So PME, there's a very little studies on this, but it refers to the cyclical worsening of symptoms from an already existing medical condition during the premenstrual phase of the menstrual cycle. So unlike PMDD symptoms, which primarily are occurring premenstrually, PME is the intensification of symptoms that already exist. So we see this a lot with autoimmune conditions. We see this with ADHD. We see this with sensitivities that come along with autism. We see this with, you know, hyper or hypothyroidism, major depression, anxiety disorders, OCD, on and on and on. Basically, any condition you're already experiencing can be worse premenstrually because of hormone changes and inflammation in the body and brain. So, why is monitoring your cycle important? Your menstrual cycle symptoms are an indicator of your overall health. I've said this 1,000 times, and I will say it 1,000 more times. Your menstrual cycle is a vital sign. In 2015, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which I have cited below here, you can see, rated the menstrual cycle as a vital sign. That means your menstrual cycle is as important as your heart rate, as important as your body temperature, as important as your respiratory rate in telling you information about the functioning of your overall health. So, tracking your symptoms and understanding how to interpret that data is going to aid you in diagnosing hormone disorders or imbalances and prepare you to better manage your cycle symptoms. And again, also help with keeping a data record that's going to help you measure the efficacy of treatments. And that's not only the efficacy of treatments, so are the treatments working, but also are you experiencing adverse effects from a supplement, a lifestyle change, a medication? The symptom mapping process can do that. We're going to break down the difference between cycle tracking and symptom mapping in a moment, but first I want to just share a little bit of basic reproductive health education with you because it's so lacking, and I suspect that if you haven't worked through our PMDD rehab course or if you haven't worked through our Meet Your Menstrual Cycle mini course, probably have not received adequate reproductive health education, unfortunately. And that is my second recommendation for you if you're looking for how to get started in reducing your symptoms, you need to know about your cycle. It's like, if our bike was broken and we were like, okay, my bike's broken, I want to ride it. I'm going to go over and fix it, but I don't know what the parts are. I don't know what they're called. I don't know how they connect to each other. I don't know what tools I need. I don't know how long it's going to take. That's kind of this position that we're in when it comes to addressing PMS and PMDD symptoms or even PCOS and endometriosis symptoms. A lot of reproductive health conditions can fall into this conversation where it's like, okay, do you even know what hormones are? Do you even know how to properly identify your anatomy? Do you know the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, what to expect in each phase, how that impacts your mood and mental health? If the answer is no, and you really don't have a solid foundation there, that's really where we have to start. It's so empowering and it really can give you so much hope as you move forward and forgiveness. And it's like a salve to the wound, this education. So, to start out, if you don't already know this, there are 4 phases of the menstrual cycle if you're cycling naturally. Now, if you're using any sort of hormone hormonal birth control, or if you're using an IUD or the shot or an implant that's going to suppress ovulation, you're not going to be moving through these phases. So that's important to know. You're not going to have a menstrual cycle. You're going to have a withdrawal bleed if you are bleeding on those medications. But regardless, you should still know how your body functions. And there are four phases to a true menstrual cycle. There's the menstrual phase where you're bleeding, which is going to last 3 to 7 days there in a healthy cycle. There's the follicular phase, which is going to last 7 to 10 days that follows it. The luteal phase, the ovulatory phase is next, going in the circle right here. And technically, you ovulate for 1 day, but because your cervical fluid can nourish sperm for up to 5 days, we consider this about a 6 to 7 day window for the ovulatory phase and the hormone profile there when we're looking at it, breaking it down into the four phases. And then the luteal phase is the longest phase, that 10 to 14 days. And that is where we're going to be experiencing premenstrual symptoms. That is the premenstrual phase. And then just a little look at the hormones across the menstrual cycle, what they're doing during those different phases, what the hormones are. All of these are going to be shifting in a natural cycle. If you're using a hormonal contraceptive, your hormone levels are in a menopausal state throughout the entire pill pack. Um, I'm not going to get into the nuances of all the other birth control methods, but you can learn about that in Meet Your Menstrual Cycle, the mini course. Here are some other changes that are happening throughout those different phases. So not only are your hormones fluctuating, but it's creating a cascade of other physiological changes from endometrial changes, ovarian changes, cervical fluid changes, and basal body temperature changes. So there's a lot that your body is doing. Menstruation is a massive vascular event that requires much energy, and you deserve to know about all of these changes and how they impact you, what's normal, what's not, and what you can do about what you're learning about yourself in the process of mapping your symptoms. And then I like to think of the cycles as the different cycle phases as different seasons. So we're thinking of winter as the menstrual phase. We're thinking of spring as the follicular phase. We're thinking of summer as the ovulatory phase. And we're thinking of autumn or fall as the luteal phase. And you can use that, you can overlay that in your lifestyle, diet, and the way that you're caring for yourself. Like, how would you take care of yourself in winter? How would you eat? That gives you a pretty good idea of what you should be doing during your menstrual phase. And you can apply that to each of these four seasons. This four-season analogy, we give you guides for cycle syncing in the Meet Your Menstrual Cycle mini course. So we break all of that down simply for you with a guide, but you can just overlay that idea onto how you're navigating your cycle from phase to phase. And then I just wanted to touch on, what is actually a healthy cycle. So a cycle shorter than 24 days or longer than 36 days may indicate a hormone imbalance or underlying health condition. A healthy menstrual cycle phase ranges from 3 to 7 days. So if you're bleeding less or longer period of time, that can be indicating that something is going on. We also want the first day of your period to be the heaviest day. Then a normal and healthy blood color is going to be bright red with minimal clotting. Clots are giving us information about the hormone status within your body. And then normal healthy blood volume loss is going to be from 30 to 60 milliliters, or anything less than 30 milliliters would be falling outside of the normal healthy category, or anything more than 80 milliliters can indicate an underlying health condition. And just to give you an idea there, a regular tampon and pad holds around 5 milliliters, and a super tampon or pad can hold around 10 milliliters. Now, again, in the Meet Your Menstrual Cycle mini course, we give you a chart. We help you figure out how to gauge how much blood you're losing so you can navigate this and incorporate that into your symptom awareness and knowledge. But let's not talk about the difference between cycle tracking and symptom mapping. So, cycle tracking is the process of tracking your menstrual cycle. We all have apps. We pretty much all do this at this point. And here you're mostly recording like the dates that you're bleeding, maybe how long you're bleeding. Maybe you're recording the quality of your blood. Maybe you're recording some symptoms. But generally, the cycle tracking process is pretty minimal, a pretty minimal amount of information and solely linked to your menstrual cycle symptoms, or maybe you're like inputting a few symptoms in the luteal phase. Whereas symptom mapping is a process of tracking and recording your cycle symptoms and their level of severity throughout each of the four phases of the menstrual cycle. And we're looking for a pattern here. So you're creating a visual representation over the month of your physical and psychological symptoms. We're recording less information in the symptom mapping process about period symptoms, although you could absolutely use our Google spreadsheet and personalize this and modify to add more details if you wanted to do that. But we're really looking for reoccurring patterns of symptom presentation in both what symptom you're experiencing and how long you're experiencing it. And you can start to see the pattern just by glancing at this small graph, but I'm going to make this graph bigger in a moment. And it's really helpful to do this for a quick visual interpretation of your patterns. And then we target those patterns and we target those symptoms based on your personal symptom pattern. And you're probably thinking, okay, but Jess, this sounds really overwhelming, writing something down every day. You know, this isn't something we ask you to do forever. This is something, if you want to advocate for a PMDD diagnosis or explore PMDD diagnosis, you'll need to do this for 3 months. And I recommend doing this for 3 to 4 months if you're getting really serious about addressing your symptoms. But this isn't a process that you need to necessarily do forever. It's more of an intensive process that you're going to do when you're addressing symptoms or trying to get a diagnosis. So we're using symptom mapping to assess your symptoms for a diagnosis, to differentiate PME symptoms from PMDD symptoms, to determine your symptom pattern, which is going to give you a lot of information about yourself and help you start to create some distance between the experience and who you are as a person, because those can get really mucked up together where you feel fundamentally flawed as a human being because you experience these episodes and you're not able to realize and recognize the cyclical nature. When you start to see the symptom mapping process, it's almost like a weather report, and you're like, oh, I am feeling very stabby in the grocery store. Let me check what cycle day I'm on. Oh, I'm on cycle day 21, right on time. That's not me as a person. That's an experience that I'm having based on my hormone fluctuations. So it can really help you build more self-awareness about your experience, learn to communicate about your experience differently. It's so powerful. And then it can help you judge the efficacy of protocols, whether they're working, neutral, or you're experiencing any adverse effects, and then monitoring side effects of medications as well. So, really powerful tool. Can't emphasize that enough. And then tips for symptom mapping that I have is that you'll want to wait until the end of the day or the morning of the next day to record your data because you want a full day to gauge. You can habit stack this with something that you already have in place. So if you brush your teeth every night before bed, you can put this with a pen and paper next to your toothbrush. If you drink a cup of tea or coffee in the morning, you can keep this on the refrigerator. A lot of my clients like to do that just as a communication tool as well. If you're checking your emails every morning and you're using the Google or Excel spreadsheet, you can tag that on to checking your emails. You can set an alarm. You could use Post-its to remind yourself as you're building this as a habit. Okay. So now let's look at a zoomed in example of the symptom mapping process. I hope you can see this okay. But here, this is the top half of the graph. And we start with cycle day one. So cycle day one is the first day that you're menstruating. And this example was filled out in December of 25. So she started menstruating on December 17th was cycle day one for her. Here we have a habits section. You can use this or not, but this is where you would be writing down, okay, I'm taking a supplement, I'm trying to drink more water, what are some of the things you're doing to be healthier, to improve your cycle? And you can record the days that you're doing that. And then say you're recording a medication, you can say, okay, I started a medication here, and you can start to pay attention over the next period of data collection. How is that medication or supplement impacting my symptoms on the days that I'm taking it, starting from this state? So this is where the protocols or medication are going to be placed. And then on this axis over here, you're going to be writing your symptoms. And we categorize symptoms as mild, moderate, or severe. Some of my clients like to use the Google or Excel spreadsheet and make more categories. I like the simplicity. So again, you can modify the resource to make it work better for you. And I'm going to explain how we categorize the mild, moderate, and severe in a moment. But here I just want to give you a representation of what this is looking like. Now, this client is using a bar chart format, so she's coloring all the way up if she's having a severe symptom, and that makes it really easy to quickly look and see the pattern. Now, some of my more creative clients who get really into this use different colors for different severity levels, or you could just fill in one box and still see you can still see a pattern, which you'll see in another example, but I also just tend to prefer the bar chart format. Make sure I didn't miss anything on there. Yep, okay. So then the bottom section here, more symptoms. Now you can compare your or combine your symptoms if they are showing up together, but you don't have to. It's really individual to you how you want to break these down. I don't recommend charting more than 10 symptoms. That's just too overwhelming. So really picking out the symptoms that are the most severe, the most reoccurring, that you're most interested in addressing, if you can narrow that down to 10 symptoms. And then down here, this is a really important section. This is the notes section. So another piece of reproductive health education that you need to know is that the follicular development of each egg that you ovulate takes 90 days. That's why I work with my clients for 4 months, because it takes about 90 days to start to really see the differences. I mean, not always. So we can see very quick results from certain targeted lifestyle and diet changes, but that follicular development takes 90 days. So say I have a traumatic event this cycle. I get fired from my job or my dog dies. The stress of that experience could impact me for 3 into 4 menstrual cycles to come. So you're not going to remember, oh, 2 months ago I got into a fight with my best friend and now it's 3 months later and maybe that stress could be impacting my menstrual cycle. Probably not. Like I can't remember what I ate for lunch 5 days ago. So 2 months ago on cycle day 17, I'm not going to know how severe my symptoms were. So here's where you're going to write down any major changes. So starting a supplement, making a lifestyle change, traveling, any sort of episodes that you would have, because everything can impact your cycle. Everything has the power to impact your cycle, and every menstrual cycle is unique. So you're going to use the note section for that. And then here's an example of premenstrual exacerbation. So there's only 4 days of this entire cycle that this client had no depression symptoms. That's not PMDD. It's worse premenstrually, but it doesn't fall into the category of PMDD. And so that can be really helpful for you to navigate as you're trying to determine, what is really going on with me. Just another example, this is within the Google spreadsheet doc of different ways that clients are choosing to chart or map their symptoms. So you have agency on how you decide to do this. And then breaking those symptoms down, and this is explained in the symptom mapping kit as well, but what are mild symptoms? They're noticeable. What are moderate symptoms? They're uncomfortable. What are severe symptoms? They're impacting your ability to function normally. And then what do we want to record in that notes section? Like I said before, travel, stress, illness, starting or stopping a medication, sleep disturbances, vaccinations, emotional or physical stress, changes in diet or exercise, among so many more things, can impact your cycle and your symptoms. And then we have that 90-day folliculogenesis period that's going to be playing a role as well. So you're going to want to record those things in the note section, knowing that they can be triggers for more severe symptoms, not only this cycle, but in upcoming cycles as well. And then the symptom mapping process, as you start to collect this data, it's going to show you, hey, what are some of my triggers? What are some dietary triggers potentially? What are some lifestyle triggers? What are some environmental factors that can be playing a role? How is stress and sleep impacting my cycle? How is exercise and movement impacting my cycle? How are my interpersonal relationships impacting my cycle? Because, where your attention goes, energy flows, or something like that is a quote. And as you're mapping, you're paying more attention. And so you're going to start to notice triggers and patterns, which is going to build more self-awareness for you. It can really change your whole experience of living with PMDD. And then in the action planning stage, once you recognize your patterns and you're analyzing your data and you're seeing your symptom clusters, and you can use that pattern recognition to take action. You can create a personalized management strategy where you're adjusting your lifestyle and you're making modifications based on your patterns. It's going to help you learn when to implement interventions and when to ask for support. So you can tweak things. You can agree to go to events when you know you're going to be feeling really good and maybe decline some of those invitations later in the month or later in your cycle. It's going to change how the preparation phase, which we're going to talk about next, and the management phase, like the reduction and management, two different areas that we work on to address symptoms. You can also use this as a communication tool because you're learning more about yourself and your patterns. It can help you ask for support. It absolutely validates your experience. Like I said before, it can create distance between you and the experience. It helps you be kinder to yourself. It can help you get a diagnosis if that's what you're looking to explore. It can help you identify premenstrual exacerbation. And again, it can help you monitor the efficacy of protocols or the side effects or benefits of medications or supplements that you're taking. And so this is where I was talking about the two windows. When I'm working with clients, there are two techniques that we like to use. We like to use reduction techniques. Everyone that comes to work with me or comes into my programs, they want to reduce their symptoms. That's why you're here. That's why you're on this call today. But we also need strategies to manage symptoms because how you manage your symptoms can determine, are you in a relationship? Do you still have custody of your children? Do you still have a job? Right? Like how you handle yourself during an episode can kind of make or break the quality of your life. So yes, we want to reduce symptoms, but we also need management tools to manage the symptoms when we're there. And we don't want to do those things at the same time. Because if you're escalating into a PMDD episode, that's probably not the time to be like, I'm going to regulate my blood sugar now. I'm going to address macronutrient deficiencies and microdeficiencies now. No, that's not how this works. You're de-escalation. You're in the de-escalation mode. So depending on when your symptom pattern is showing up, I'm going to go with like the basic pattern for many of us is that by the time you're in the follicular phase, you are no longer symptomatic. So this is when we work on reduction techniques during the follicular and ovulatory phases. And then when you're in the luteal and menstrual phase, we're working with management techniques. Now, if your symptoms alleviate as soon as you get your period and it's like a light switch flips and here you are, you're back, Then this graph would turn, and in the menstrual phase and follicular phase, you would be working with reduction techniques. And then if your symptoms are onsetting ovulation, like they do for many of us, then you would be working on management techniques during the ovulatory and luteal phase. But only you can know that by doing the symptom mapping process to find out what your symptom pattern is. And then here I just wanted to share the diagnostic criteria of PMDD. If you haven't seen this in the DSM-5, you can take a look at it here. I already talked through these symptoms and I talked through the diagnostic process and all of this. So I'm not going to talk more here, but you can take a moment to look. And then moving on, testing is really important for PMDD. PMDD is a diagnosis of exclusion. So any other condition that could be driving these symptoms needs to be ruled out. To do that in a conventional sense, you're going to be using blood serum testing. And here is a testing page that I have made for you that you can get in the symptom mapping kit, where I have listed all of the blood labs that I like to see. Now, if we can do a whole nother training on testing, but generally, if you have health insurance in the United States, you can get blood labs ran through your insurance that are covered, not applied to your deductible, once per year. So if you can do that, I highly recommend, check with your insurance and then do that once per year. The problem is you're probably going to be told, if you haven't already, everything's fine and normal and you're healthy. Now, if you're experiencing these symptoms, we need to look harder. So within the conventional medicine model, they're using wider lab ranges because they're diagnosing and treating disease. In integrative and functional medicine, we use more narrow lab ranges because we're helping you optimize your health. So never has a client come to me and said, all my labs are normal, and I look at them through my lab ranges and say, yeah, all your labs are normal. It's never happened. There's always things that your body is telling us. And it's great if you're not in a diseased state yet, but what's going to happen is you're going to be told, everything's fine, you're normal, everything's fine until you're in a diseased state and then they diagnose and treat you. Well, we don't want you to escalate to that point. We want you to address these symptoms now so that you don't become in a diseased state. Although if you're dealing with PMDD, you certainly feel like you're already in a diseased state. And then I have lists for the functional blood labs I run at our virtual premenstrual clinic listed below in there so you can look at those. And then I also have an option for, go to your doctor, advocate for these labs, and then come work with me to interpret them. That's an option as well. And here are some of the functional labs that I like to run. So in the blood serum testing, something I often am looking at is nutrient status. I'm a nutritional therapist. It's no secret. I don't hide the fact that I'm very biased about the impacts of nutrition on the severity of these symptoms. The research is there. I don't need to convince you you're here. Here are a few recent blood lab reviews that I did for clients. Look at their vitamin D status. For a woman of reproductive age, we would like to see optimal vitamin D levels around 60 nanograms per milliliter. All of these clients are 30 or below. This is going to play a huge role in the severity of your symptoms. And again, your doctor, is just going to tell you to take a vitamin D supplement, and that's not the solution. So, then we have hair tissue mineral analysis. This is my two favorite labs for PMDD are hair tissue mineral analysis and functional blood serum. Here's an example of that. Here we have macro minerals, calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium, and the reference range is this white section. And look, some of these aren't even that bad, but look how below reference range all of these are. And this is going to be playing a huge role in your ability to navigate stress, in your stress response system, in you feeling overwhelmed, feeling out of control, feeling burnt out. So looking at mineral status gives us a lot of clues about the functioning of your physiology that we can target. And then here's an example of a Dutch hormone panel. I don't love blood serum tests for hormones because hormones pulse. So sex hormones specifically. So all hormones pulse, but sex hormones pulse also. And if you're going in for blood lab testing for sex hormones, it's just not as ideal as looking at a 24-hour, or you can even do a salival panel that's an entire month to look at your levels. And this isn't the best example. I have some much wilder examples here, but this client's free cortisol pattern is not ideal. No cortisol in the evenings and high spiking cortisol 30 minutes after waking. And we see a lot. We see your sex hormone metabolites in a Dutch urine hormone panel. But I just want to share the knowledge that like there's a lot more options for you than just being told everything's fine and normal and just suck it up. There's so much more we can look at. There's so many more avenues that we can take to help you target these symptoms and get you getting your life back. And how we do that here at my integrative women's health practice is through these two wheels. In coaching and in PMDD rehab, we are covering the 7 core areas of hormone health. So we are evaluating all of these areas, you're getting educated on them, and you're learning what you can do to improve each of them. Now, you're not going to do that all at once, but you do need that information. And then in the nutritional therapy side of things, we're addressing these areas and helping you come into a homeostasis with these areas, which when they're out of balance are going to be driving symptoms as well as, the core areas of hormone health. So I love a visual, you know that about me. So just wanted to share that visual with you. And then before we wrap up, I want to share another client case study. So we asked this client before you started the program, what were your primary hormonal mood symptoms and how were they impacting your quality of life? And she said drastic mood swings, anger, rage, prolonged depression periods, severe cramping, joint pain, headaches, anxiety, and automatic negative thoughts were affecting my daily life as a wife and mother and causing isolation, insecurities, guilt, shame, and impulsive behaviors. Sound familiar? She came to work with me in April. These dates are wrong. She came to work with me in April and we ran her symptom assessment. She, was in the high priority for all of these different organs and body systems. We targeted these areas. For her, we didn't even run functional labs. She just did the nutritional therapy and coaching package. We used her symptom data from her symptom mapping kit to target those symptoms. When we wrapped up in about August, I'm not sure why this says May, she retook this and she reduced her symptom burden down to 135 points. So from 518 points to 135. So that was a total symptom burden reduction of 383 points, which is so incredible. She was feeling so much better. We asked her, in what ways has the quality of your life improved since starting the program? Are there any areas you've noticed significant positive change? And she said, significant positive changes have been made in my parenting journey. I can pause and reflect inwardly most days and approach by responding rather than reacting. My marriage is more communicative. I'm learning to live in the moment and use relaxation rather than constantly use distraction to keep my mind busy. I'm finding more joy in the everyday and feeling less depressed or isolated. I don't feel like I'm faking or forcing my social interactions anymore during different phases of my cycle. So we're talking about real changes in people's lives, real quality of life improvements by targeting these symptoms with a symptom mapping process, learning to reduce and manage them. Some additional resources that we have for you, we have courses, we have workshops, we have lab testing, we have workbooks, we have the symptom assessment, we have our free resources here, we have our support community, we have the blog, and now we also have the podcast, which I did not put on here, but the PMDD Pep Talk podcast is alive and well. If you haven't listened to it, you can find it anywhere that you get your podcasts, and there's a link on our website. If you're not already following along on social media, we have YouTube, we have Instagram, And I would love to see you there. Don't be a stranger. Would love to hear from you. If you do this, if you do start symptom mapping, I would love to hear what you learn about yourself, how it's going for you. And yeah, thanks for being here today. So I'm